It's a brand new morning, rise up to a brand new dawn.
Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, yes, we are getting into some of the politics, getting into some of the comments on the recently concluded local government elections. Although it's not quite over because we know there's going to be some recounts happening in a few places in Trinidad. So to give us a perspective on the preliminary results, we are being joined by political analyst Dr. Winford James. Good morning and welcome to you, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Ms. Jackson. I am strong and good. How are you doing?
I am good. It's good to see that after a long night, you're still alive and well.
Par for the course. Par for the course.
Certainly. Now, we're once again in a deadlock between the UNC and the PNM. Of course, both parties are calling it victories. But from your expert opinion, what does this say about the politics of Trinidad at this point in time?
But it's not expanding in terms of support. The parties are not getting more support than they had from 2019. The voter turnout is an indication of that. We don't have all the data in just yet. I suppose during the course of the rest of the week, we will have such data. But the PNM has not advanced its position, nor has in terms of seats I'm talking, the areas that they've won, there are 14 corporations. Neither of the two major parties has advanced its position with respect to electoral support. So people have been hearing, I think, what the parties have had to say during the campaign, but the people have not been listening. The people are hearing, but they have not been listening. It's almost as if they have written off both parties in terms of getting wider engagement with the people. So both parties have a job to do to expand their appeal to the population. It could also be, Kandace, it could also be that people understand that local government elections do not confer the real power in politics. It's the parliamentary elections that do. And when local elections are held, the distribution of resources is perhaps unequal with the ruling party being favored in the process. And people see neglect all around them, and they hear all kinds of reasons and excuses. And, well, they simply stay at home. So there's lots to be done. The government, of course, has come up with an act to reform local government elections. And if you ask people, what is it the act says? Nobody knows. Hardly anybody knows. If you ask people to tell you what they expected to see from reform, they will tell you things like drains and, taking care of community facilities and so on. People simply do not know. And Dr. Rowley, in his post-election remarks, said that now that the elections are out of the way, then he and his party and his cabinet could proceed to make the changes that he has not made since he began office, and even, of course, since he was part of the party that has been ruling the country. But he says he's going to be applying himself now to the implementation process. And you know that is going to be important because one of the clauses in the Reform Act is the collection of property tax.
Yes.
Yes, by the various corporations.
Now, do you think that Dr. Rowley would be able to execute those plans smoothly? I mean, we heard him last night. He called for the cooperation of all the elected representatives towards this. Like, what is the road looking like ahead for even just getting the property tax implementing that, and I mean, making the changes to result in that local government reform that he campaigned on?
Well, I don't know if he campaigned or not. That's what he claimed. But in my area, in Trinidad, where you are calling me from, nobody discussed any reform issues. Whether they had a town meeting, which I don't think they did, or they announced their messages via loudspeaker, roving loudspeaker. But he says that that's what he campaigned on. If he did campaign on that, he merely recovered the votes that he had or the party had in 2019, because the situation has not changed, Kandace. He can't boast that the people have endorsed his attempts to reform local government, because he has not won more seats than he did in 2019. It's still 7 seats for the PNM, and it's still 7 seats for the UNC. But the UNC is not in government, the PNM is. And the PNM will have to contend with the UNC and with the UNC's own ideas about what local government should be all about, what the changes are. Of course, the act has been changed and has been assented to by the president. So we are talking implementation now. There's going to be a lot of pushback from the opposition, and they began that process before the elections. So we have to wait and see how that goes forward. But my main concern is the ignorance of the general population about local government reform and the part they can play in their corporations to improve what passes for local governance in the country. There's a lot of work to be done, Kandace, and the engagement with the people, in my mind, is paramount.
Yes, and I mean, as you brought up that point, we saw political leaders on both sides of the spectrum. They were the ones that leading the campaigns. And there was a campaign that came out of the whole season that you heard from the political leaders about major issues within the country, but you did not hear necessarily from the representatives themselves, the candidates themselves,
Right.
about the issues that really do affect people on the ground in the sphere of local governments.
Yes, that's true. I suppose they would argue that they walk around the communities, the corporations, and they talk with people, and they get a sense of that, and they get a sense of people's ideas as well. But the wider population does not know, and the wider population does not know, because the politics is not being orchestrated in that way. That's how the culture of our politics, to get people to feed those who are ruling them, those who are on top. It's not a bottom up. It's not a bottom up um, kind of situation.
All right. And then we are seeing as well that coming from the preliminary results that the UNC got captured the popular vote. So even though the seats are what it is at that deadlock, that's a 7-7 split, the regional corporations, I should say, but we're seeing that the UNC was able to garner more of the votes than the PNM. What does that say about the strength of the PNM right now in Trinidad?
What's the significance of getting the popular vote at the local government level? People talk about, parties getting more votes than the other. It has no governance effect. It is what has happened, but our politics at that level is related to how many seats you win in the election, and there are 14 of them, right? Whether you win the popular vote or not does not affect the price of cocoa. You follow what people use that because they see that as an advantage. They use it and say, well, more people voted for us. But that's not how it goes. It's how many seats you have. Just as in the parliamentary election, it's how many seats you win that would dictate whether you form the government or not. So people use that because it can be a talking point, but it's a useless talking point, except of course the our party gets the popular, wins the popular vote, but does not win a seat. Then that becomes a very constitutional matter, a matter for constitutional reform. How can a party not win a seat even though it has the majority votes in an election? For there's a lot to be done, you know. People have to get more engaged in the process, and Tobago itself has to get engaged. Even though these elections are for Trinidad and we have our own House of Assembly elections, it's one country, and therefore we must be in, but show the kind of interest that running a unitary state, that's what we call it, implies.
And as you
You know,
mentioned,
Kandace, just before you come in there, Dr. Rowley told us many times in the past that the reform itself and the kind of governance mimics what happens at the House of Assembly, and that is something we should be discussing. When we look at the legislation for local government reform, is it like what happens at the level of the House of Assembly? We are not discussing these issues, and we need to. How are these corporations going to be funded? You know, whose policies are they going to implement? Their own or the policies of the government?
and then as we are talking about Tobago, what about the results in regards to the PDP, especially where Watson Duke is concerned? I mean, he was not able to garner enough votes, or he
Did you
barely able to
expect
make a
him to?
dent in Port of Spain.
Did you expect him to?
Well, it was not really for me to expect, but it was just to wait and to
No,
see what
as
was
a
going to
member of the
happen.
population, you should be. But no, Mr. Duke did not make any impact whatsoever. I don't know what his takings are with respect to the seats that his party went up in. I don't know. But he doesn't have that kind of appeal in Trinidad. And the results, of course, suggested that. Not only that, you know, but the other parties, even though they did better than they thought they would, they're still a distance away from winning seats for representation at the level of the councils of the corporations.
To say for the political future of Mr. Duke. So he tried Trinidad, he declared, he wants to be mayor of Port of Spain. He tried it. It did not work. It didn't work close to in his favor, not even close to, because when he went for an independent candidate in 2015, he was actually able to gain some more votes in a couple polling stations than the elected candidate in Roxborough. And it was from then that he built out the PDP. However, we're not seeing anything like that with this try in Port of Spain.
If he's
So
really serious, he has a long way to
what's
go.
there for him to do now?
He must effect the kind of politics that he wants to effect, right? But he has a long way to go before he can get to the point where he can be the mayor of anything, and certainly the prime minister of anything. So I think we might be spending more time on Mr. Duke than the situation warrants.
All right. And then when you just look at just the general feeling on the ground now, like Dr. Rowley said last night, the elections have come and gone, and now it's on the road to general elections in 2025. What is the feeling on the ground right now among the people? Do they care? Do they not care?
Well, I don't know that people are calling. I mean, there will be some people who want an election to be held so they can have an opportunity to kick him out. But it's a long way to go, and a lot of politics will take place before 2025 arrives. You follow? a day in politics can be a long, long time. I want to tell you that. Right? So, Dr. Rowley is probably hinting that there's a need to begin implementing the act because the act has been assented to, and so how long we must ask ourselves would it take to put the machinery in place in each of the 14 corporations so we can say that the government is following the very act that it created. We don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Talk is cheap, Kandace. But Dr. Rowley's history with respect to local government reform is not the best. It's very patchy. It's taken a long time, right? So we are going to have to wait and see the extent to which he engages with the people, the extent to which the people engage with him, the extent to which people who want more power over their lives in the local communities. That should be an exciting thing. But we will wait to see how he engages. But don't forget, Kandace, that the UNC has as many seats as Dr. Rowley's party did. It's not as if he won more seats than anybody. The people are giving, shall we say, the people are giving regard to what the UNC has done as well. It's not only what the PNM has done. They are in power. So, you can say that they have the edge over anybody once you're in power, the way our politics is structured. But there's a lot of work to be done. And starting with the property tax, we will see how the government proceeds.
And then when you look at the results as well, it seems as though it's an indicator. Or, I mean, even though there is still some time before the general elections, but maybe we can predict that for the general elections there would be another tie in Trinidad where Tobago will then come into play. Tobago's seats would be very important. So then what does that say, I mean, for even just the emergence of the TPP on Sunday, having its official launch, how does all of that work together as we move on towards
Well,
general
if you're
elections?
talking about it from the PNM point of view, the PNM's position, if it wants to continue, is not particularly safe. There are many people gunning for the PNM, right? And you mentioned there the Tobago People's Party is gunning for the PNM. Watson Duke's PDP is gunning for the PNM. So, but it's too early to say. Things change over time, but we can say that we are watching the developments, and the developments, and if we make a prediction from this point, do not seem to be favoring the PNM because it's got to fight to keep those 2 seats. And in Trinidad, there's a lot of disaffection with the PNM in the way it has been conducting government in the country. So it's not as if the PNM will have planes sailing, but it's too early to be definitive about what's going on now vis-a-vis what will happen in the parliamentary elections.
Viewing everything that has happened, what course should the TPP take? Or what lessons should they learn from the local government elections?
Should who take?
The TPP, the Tobago
The
People's
who?
Party.
They have no lessons to take. They are now starting up, as a party at least. They have to engage with the people if they want to survive. They can't run their politics apart from the people. They cannot be perceived to be even though they won 14 seats, they cannot be perceived to be taking action disconnected from the people. So their fortunes will depend in large part on how well they carry the people along with them. If they don't, they're going to fail miserably. That might be a lesson here. How do they hold on to their 14 seats? Well, yes, time will tell. But the trick is to consult with the people, be guided by what they think. They'll have to continue doing that if they want to survive, if they want to do well against the PNM in particular.
And then just looking at the coverage last night, and even over the past couple of weeks, we saw some of the PNM leaders. We saw political leader of the Tobago Council, Answer Dennis, Senator Lawrence Hislop, and Minority Leader Kelvin Morris. They were on the campaign trail in Trinidad for the PNM, and they
Right.
were part of the machinery at Balize House last night.
Yeah.
What does that say about what's happening in the PNM camp, especially where Tobago is concerned?
The PNM has always had a united front, at least on the surface, if not deep down under the surface. So you have always had the Tobago politicians, the leaders, joining with Trinidad in local government elections, right? And you do have it too in the parliamentary elections. The political leader of the PNM, other high-ranking personnel in the PNM, they go down and they give help to the effort in Trinidad to win seats, especially in the marginal areas or the PNM disfavoring areas. So that's not remarkable. The PNM has that sense of public unity. I mean, they have their own problems, but they are very good at not expanding those problems beyond the party itself. So, but people look at them all the time because they're the ones in charge, and they are looking. The PNM are looking at what's transpiring in Tobago. We have seen Barry Augustine. They're now calling him FC Augustine. Barry Augustine calling for the general elections. In fact, suggesting that the PNM the Prime Minister should have called a
General
general
elections
election
instead of
rather than
local.
a local government election. You know, so there's a lot of pressure being put on Dr. Rowley and his team, but it's going to be a very brave man, very brave analyst who could tell you definitively that these are the results that we are going to witness in 2025. you know, let me
And
just take that one.
okay, and Dr. Winford James, well, we are unfortunately out of time for this segment, but I definitely want to thank you for being on with us and for giving us your perspective after what was a pretty long night.
Okay, you're
All right.
welcome.
Thank you so much. All
Mm.
right, viewers, so don't go anywhere because we got a lot more coming up for you as we unpack the local government elections.